My name is Erin Campbell. I'm 39 years old, and on a Monday morning, my son died in a car accident. By lunchtime, my family was posting beach selfies from Florida with captions like, "Family time heals all." They didn't call. They didn't fly back. They didn't even send a text asking if I was okay. 2 weeks later, while I was still picking up pieces of Noah's life, they started filing paperwork to sell my grandmother's house without telling me. And when I pushed back, they called me unstable. They forged documents. They hacked my son's accounts. So I did what any grieving mother with a folder full of evidence and a lawyer on speed dial would do. I took them to court. If you've ever been blindsided by family betrayal, especially when you were at your lowest, I'd love to know your story. Drop a comment below. Like and subscribe if this hits close to home. Because trust me, what happened next? They never saw coming. I stared at the screen, at the glowing image of Rachel with her oversized sun hat and perfect smile, captioned, "Family time heals all." The comments underneath were just as nauseating. "So happy for you, girl. You deserve this break." Break. From what? From me? 2 hours earlier, I had been in a sterile hospital room with fluorescent lights too bright for grief and walls too thin to hold the weight of what I'd just heard. "Mrs. Campbell?" The officer's voice had cracked at my name. "Yes," I managed, though my throat barely worked. "There's been an accident on Route 14. Your son, Noah. We need you to come to Central General immediately." The words spun inside my head like they were fighting for space. One moment, I was standing by the coffee maker, pouring water over grounds like I had every morning for the past 16 years. The next, I was running out of the house in my robe and untied sneakers, keys shaking in my hand. The drive to the hospital is a blur I don't want to remember. All I recall is the sound of my breathing. Sharp, uneven, like it wasn't mine. Like my lungs were trying to reject the air altogether. At Central General, everything was too white, too clean, too detached. The ER doctor's lips moved, but his words didn't land. "Delivery truck. Fell asleep at the wheel. Killed on impact." I didn't cry. Not then. Not even when they asked me to sign paperwork for next of kin responsibilities. I pulled out my phone, called my mom first. Straight to voicemail. Dad. Nothing. Rachel. Sent straight to voicemail again. Then it hit me. They were on that 4 a.m. flight to Florida, the one they booked for Rachel's latest emotional reset. I texted her. "Emergency. Please call me. Noah accident." An hour later, her reply lit up my screen like an insult. "I know this is awful, sis, but this trip is the first real hope we've had in years. I hope you understand." Hope. That was the word she used. While I sat in the ER with Noah's school bag clutched to my chest like a shield, when they handed me his belongings, a cracked phone, a scuffed-up pair of sneakers, and the hoodie he always forgot in the back seat, I didn't speak, just nodded. Signed where they told me. Driving home felt like stepping backward into someone else's life. The house was silent. Noah's sneakers were still by the door. His algebra book, half open on the coffee table next to an empty cereal bowl. I walked to his room. The air still smelled like him. Lemon shampoo and mechanical pencil lead. On his bed, a t-shirt lay crumpled. The one he planned to wear for soccer practice that afternoon. I picked it up, pressed it to my face. The fabric was still soft, like it hadn't caught up yet. Then, my phone dinged. For a second, I let myself believe it was Rachel. Maybe a real apology. Maybe even my mom. But when I opened the notification, it wasn't a message from them. It was an email. Subject: Notice of will reading, estate of Noah Campbell. I stared at the words until they blurred. While I sat in grief, they were making plans. They didn't just abandon me. They started erasing me. 2 weeks after the funeral, the house felt like a mausoleum. Every floorboard creak sounded like it belonged to someone else's footsteps. The smell of lemon cleaner clung to the air, but no matter how many times I scrubbed the counters, I couldn't get rid of the lingering weight in my chest. I stood in Noah's room, staring at the half-empty bookshelf, wondering how long it would take for the world to forget him, the way my family already had. I grabbed my keys and drove to the cemetery. The sky was a dull, washed-out gray, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or just hang heavy with indecision. I parked by the gate and walked the familiar path to Noah's grave. The dirt was still uneven, a harsh reminder that the ground hadn't fully settled, just like me. A bouquet of white lilies rested by the headstone, with a small laminated card tucked inside, printed on the front, "With love from Rachel." My stomach twisted. Rachel hadn't come. No one had. They just sent flowers, paid grief. I crouched down, brushed dirt off the corner of the stone, and whispered, "You deserved better." The ringtone startled me. Unknown number. For half a second, hope bloomed. Maybe someone from the family finally remembered I existed. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Mrs. Campbell, this is Emma from First National Bank. I wanted to confirm, have you recently tried to access Noah Campbell's savings account?" I froze. Number why? There was an attempted login from an out-of-state IP this morning. It triggered a flag in our system. Who tried? I'm afraid I can't disclose that without a formal request, but I'd suggest you change your online credentials and consider placing a freeze on the account. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. The chill in my spine was immediate. Someone was going after Noah's account. When I got home, I tossed my keys on the counter and pulled out my laptop. 3 new emails sat unread. The first 2 were standard condolences from distant acquaintances. The third was from Melissa Harper, an old high school friend who now worked at the county land office. Subject: "Heads up, Evergreen Lane?" Her message was short. "Hey Aaron, this might be nothing, but I saw a property transfer request for your grandma's house on Evergreen Lane. Applicant listed as co-owner, Eric Lawson. I thought you should know." I read the email 3 times, each word sharpening like glass underfoot. Eric, Rachel's husband. What the hell was he doing filing property transfer paperwork on my grandmother's house? I closed the laptop, grabbed my phone, and dialed my parents. Voicemail. Again. I tried Rachel. Straight to voicemail. For one brief, stupid second, I considered driving over to their house, but I knew how that would go. Smiles too wide. Explanations too thin. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at a name I hadn't dialed in years. Deborah Greaves. She'd been my grandmother's attorney. Retired now, but still sharp enough to scare most corporate lawyers I'd met. I didn't overthink it. I just hit call. Greaves residence. "Deborah, it's Aaron Campbell." A pause. Then, "Aaron. It's been a while." I swallowed. "I need help. There's something going on with Noah's account and Evergreen Lane, and I don't even know where to start." Her voice softened just enough. "Start by coming over. Bring any documents you have." By the time I arrived at her house, the late afternoon sun had started to dip, casting long shadows across her front porch. The air smelled like lavender and old law books. Inside, Deborah listened without interrupting as I laid it all out. The bank call, Melissa's email, Rachel's sudden silence. When I finished, she adjusted her glasses and said, "Aaron, do you trust your sister?" The question hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at my hands, twisting the hem of my sleeve like a lifeline. Finally, I stood. "I need to check something." At home, I went straight to the hallway closet, pulled down the old fireproof safe from the top shelf, and fumbled with the combination until the lock clicked open. Inside, beneath a stack of school photos and outdated insurance papers, was the document I'd forgotten even existed. Power of attorney, signed by Noah last October. One line, bold and clear. All decision-making authority related to assets, properties, and accounts to remain solely with Aaron Campbell. The signature was his. Blue ink, a little messy, like always. My hands shook as I clutched the paper to my chest. If they want a war, they just started one. They planted whispers. I planted proof. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway at Evergreen Lane. The old porch still sagged on the left side. The chipped white paint on the fence hadn't changed since the last summer Noah and I planted tomatoes by the back steps. But something else had. The front door, usually latched shut, was slightly ajar. I killed the engine, heart pounding. For a second, I wondered if Melissa had been wrong. Maybe this was just my paranoia tightening its grip. But when I stepped onto the porch and peeked inside, the truth settled like lead in my stomach. Rachel stood in the middle of the living room, a measuring tape stretched between her hands. Eric was next to her, pointing toward the back window, talking to a tall man with a clipboard. Some real estate agent by the look of his forced smile. I didn't wait. I pulled out my phone and hit record on the voice memo app, tucking it into my back pocket before pushing open the door fully. "What the hell are you doing here?" My voice cracked, but not from fear. Rachel froze. Eric turned, his face hardening the way it always did when he didn't get his way. "We're just reevaluating the space," Rachel said quickly, retracting the tape measure like it might shield her from consequence. "Before the listing goes live." My hands shook, but I didn't lower them. "You can't list this. It's not your property." Eric stepped forward, smirking. "It's family property, Erin. Don't overreact." The air between us thickened until it felt hard to breathe. I pulled out my phone, scrolling straight to 911. "Then you won't mind if I call the police to sort this out?" Rachel's eyes widened, but she stayed silent. Eric's jaw tightened, the corner of his mouth twitching. By the time the officers arrived, Rachel had swapped her defensive tone for sugary concern. They handed over a folder, a printed authorization to sell, Eric's name front and center as co-owner. I caught the officer's expression as he flipped through the pages. Doubt flickered there, but without immediate proof, they couldn't do much more than file an incident report. When they left, Rachel pulled me aside near the front steps. Her voice was low, almost pleading. "Why are you making this harder than it needs to be?" I didn't answer. I simply walked back to my car, my heart pounding harder with every step. At home, I dug into Noah's box of keepsakes, the one he kept on the shelf, next to his battered science trophies and old movie ticket stubs. Inside, folded between two comic books, was a letter. His handwriting, messy and uneven, ran across the page. "If something happens, I want Mom to decide everything. Only her." The words blurred as my eyes burned. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. Melissa. Her text came with an attachment. Scan of the original land deed. Thought you should see it before they try anything else. I opened the file. The signature at the bottom, my father's, looked wrong. Too neat, too recent. The date? Just 3 months before he died. But I remembered. He'd already been legally incapacitated 6 months before that. Below the signature line, one of the listed witnesses had been dead for 3 years. I sat back, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't sloppiness. This wasn't grief-fueled chaos. This was fraud. A notification popped up. Voicemail from Tyler Bennett. I hit play. His voice cracked slightly but stayed steady enough to make my throat tighten. "If something happens, I want Mom to decide everything. She's the only one I trust." And that's when I realized this wasn't just grief. This was war. They thought the will reading would break me. It broke them instead. I stepped into the conference room at Willoughby Law like I wasn't the woman they expected to fall apart. The air smelled like stale coffee and overconfidence. Rachel sat near the window, legs crossed too tight, hands folded too neatly in her lap. Eric lounged beside her, scrolling through his phone like this was some tedious lunch meeting. My parents sat across from them, Dad staring at the floor, Mom glancing around with a nervous half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. I clutched the folder in my arms tighter. Thick, heavy, everything I needed. Mr. Collins, the family lawyer, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. Today we're here to read the last will and testament of Noah Campbell. He paused, eyes flicking toward me like he half expected me to bolt. I didn't. He began reading. Noah had left everything to me. His savings, his college fund, his small but meaningful investments. And, per an attached codicil from Grandma's estate, full ownership of Evergreen Lane transferred to me and Noah. Effectively now. Just me. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. But across the table, Rachel's posture cracked. Shoulders stiffening, jaw tightening. Eric was the first to speak. Loud. Almost theatrical. With all due respect, he said, standing, we have concerns regarding Erin's mental state. Given her fragile condition after Noah's passing, we feel she may not be fit to manage these responsibilities. Mr. Collins raised an eyebrow. And on what grounds? Eric reached into his briefcase like a magician pulling a rabbit, producing 2 documents he slid across the table. The first, he said smugly, is a psychological evaluation confirming long-term depressive instability. The second is a power of attorney naming Rachel and me as interim trustees for Noah's estate. I didn't even touch the papers. Instead, I nodded toward Deborah, seated beside me, cool and unbothered in her slate gray blazer. She opened her own folder, laying out each page like a poker player revealing a winning hand. First, she said, voice steady, we have an official report from Dr. Jean Porter, Ms. Campbell's licensed therapist, confirming there is no diagnosis of psychiatric instability. She slid the notarized letter across the table. Second, she continued, flipping to the next document, a forensic handwriting analysis conducted by an independent specialist, confirming that the signature on this supposed power of attorney was forged. Eric's smirk faded, but Deborah wasn't done. Third, she said, eyes locking onto Mr. Collins. Copies of email correspondence from First National Bank, alerting Erin of unauthorized access attempts on her son's account, originating from an IP address registered to Mr. Lawson. The room grew tighter. Rachel's hands started to shake. And finally, I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I tapped play. Rachel's voice filled the room, crackling but unmistakable. We lose everything if we don't do this. For a beat, there was nothing. No shifting, no coughing, just silence thick enough to suffocate. Mr. Collins set down his pen. His gaze drifted from the documents to Rachel and Eric, slow and deliberate. No one spoke. Not even my mother. Not even my father. And for the first time, they didn't have anything to say. They forged documents. I brought receipts in my son's voice. Courtroom 3B smelled like old paper and polished wood, the kind of smell that clung to your skin no matter how long you stayed. The air conditioner hummed low overhead, but I still felt the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on me. Rachel sat to my left, pretending to flip through her notes, her face pale but defiant. Eric, 2 seats down, kept tapping his pen like he was timing his next lie. My parents sat behind them, my mother wringing her hands. My father, stone-faced as always. At the opposing table, their attorney, a man with 2 perfect hair and a voice as oily as his closing arguments, cleared his throat and stood. Your Honor, he began, holding up a thick folder like it was the holy grail of mental health assessments. We submit that Ms. Erin Campbell is unfit to manage her late son's estate, citing psychological instability, severe depressive episodes, and diminished capacity following the recent family tragedy. I barely blinked. He continued, pacing with theatrical flair, painting me as a woman unhinged by grief, prone to delusion, incapable of rational decision-making. I let him finish every word. Then Deborah stood. Calm, measured, deadly. Your Honor, she said, handing over a sealed envelope. We present an official statement from Dr. Jean Porter, Ms. Campbell's licensed therapist for the past 2 years, attesting to her sound mental state. Dr. Porter herself walked up to the witness stand, her gray hair pulled into a loose bun, her voice steady as she dismantled every false claim the opposition had just made. "Grief is not a disorder," she said simply, looking the judge straight in the eye. "It's a wound. Ms. Campbell is healing from it with more clarity and strength than most." The opposing attorney shifted uncomfortably, flipping through his notes like he might find a lifeline tucked between the pages. But we weren't done. Deborah moved to Exhibit B. "Forensic handwriting analysis," she announced, placing 2 enlarged samples on the display screen. One was Noah's verified signature from last October. The other, the forged power of attorney Eric had paraded around 2 weeks ago. A hush fell as the analyst took the stand, explaining stroke patterns, pen pressure, inconsistencies that even an untrained eye could spot. Then came Exhibit C. I stood, my legs shaky but my voice steady, and played the clip from Noah's STEM lab project. His face lit up the courtroom screen. Messy hair, glasses slipping down his nose, a grin that could still punch the air out of my lungs. "If anyone asks why I trust my mom," he said, his voice bright, full of that signature teenage sarcasm, "it's because she never left, not even on the bad days." The sound of shifting chairs filled the silence as the judge adjusted her glasses, watching the video until the last frame faded. But Deborah kept going. Melissa Harper from the Land Records Office took the stand next, confirming that the land title Eric had submitted was a forgery, complete with a witness signature from a man who'd been dead for 3 years. Then Tyler. His hands trembled as he clutched the microphone, but his voice didn't waver. "Noah gave me this. Told me to hold on to it in case something ever happened." He glanced at me, said his mom would need it. Deborah handed over the USB Tyler had kept. On the screen appeared another clip. Noah, sitting cross-legged on his bedroom floor, holding a cardboard model of what would have been Archer Lab. "If I'm not here, it's still her call. Always her." The opposing attorney didn't even stand to object. Finally, Deborah turned to me. "Ms. Campbell, do you have anything to add?" I stood, unfolded the last page of Noah's letter, and read aloud. "Only you, Mom. No one else. Not even Aunt Rachel." The room held its breath. The judge lowered her pen, eyes steady as she delivered the ruling. "Petition denied. Full rights remain with Ms. Erin Campbell." The gavel hit the block with a crack that felt like it split the air in two. They tried to erase me. I built something permanent instead. The morning sun spread soft gold across the front porch of Evergreen Lane. The air smelled like fresh paint and sawdust, mixed with the faint sweetness of late summer hydrangeas. I stood at the base of the steps, holding the new sign in both hands. "Noah Science Center, where curiosity lives." I ran my thumb over the engraved letters, tracing each groove like it might lead me somewhere steadier. Then, with a deep breath, I lifted the sign onto its hooks and let it settle into place. By 9 o'clock, the first wave of kids arrived. Backpacks swinging, voices overlapping like an orchestra of too much energy and not enough volume control. Tyler stood near the entrance, helping direct parents to the registration table Melissa had set up. Deborah hovered by the main door, clipboard in hand but with a rare smile breaking through her usual stern expression. I watched as one little girl with wild curls and paint-splattered sneakers broke from the group and ran straight for the reading nook we'd built by the window. Another boy pressed his face against the terrarium in the corner, wide-eyed at the darting movements of the tiny salamander inside. Somewhere near the 3D printer station, I heard laughter. Real, full-throated, unfiltered. I found myself smiling before I even realized it. Near mid-morning, as I helped a group of kids set up a simple baking soda rocket, a boy with thick glasses tugged at my sleeve. "Miss Erin?" he asked, voice small but steady. Can we make mistakes here?" I knelt to his height, hands still covered in specks of flour and vinegar. "That's the whole point," I said, smiling. "Mistakes are welcome." He grinned, running off toward the launch pad. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low enough to cast long shadows across the front yard. Parents began gathering their kids, thanking us, making promises to return next week. Melissa waved goodbye to the last family, and Tyler gave me a quick thumbs up before heading toward his bike. Deborah lingered a little longer, her gaze sweeping across the porch like she wanted to memorize it. "You did it," she said quietly, then left without waiting for a reply. When the last car pulled away, I sat on the top step, resting my elbows on my knees, staring at the spot near the garden where Noah's handprint still lived in the concrete from when he was 9. I pulled the old locket from my pocket. Silver, scratched at the edges, but still holding. I opened it. Inside, a tiny picture of Noah, one I'd taken on a day when he'd been too busy building cardboard rockets to notice me sneaking a photo. Next to me sat his final letter, folded and refolded more times than I could count. I ran my fingers along the creases, rereading that last line. "If I'm gone, just build something good from it, okay?" The sunset painted the sky in streaks of amber and rose. I stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and let the light hit my face. "I kept everything, Noah," I whispered, voice steady this time. "Even the parts of me I didn't know were yours." After months of silence, doubt, and calculated betrayal, the truth finally stood louder than every lie they built. Erin didn't just reclaim what was hers. She transformed her grief into a legacy they could never touch. Because when injustice meets unwavering resolve, even the most carefully crafted deceptions collapse. And as the first students stepped through the doors of the Noah Science Center, one thing became clear. Some stories don't end with defeat. They begin again with purpose. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. If this story reminded you of your own fight to reclaim what's rightfully yours, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below, hit like, and subscribe for more stories about standing up, speaking out, and never letting betrayal define you. Because sometimes, the best way to close one chapter is to write the next one on your own terms.